Radio presents The Truth Denied Talk Radio with your host, Roxy Lopez, where truth never lies. If you would like to speak with Roxy on the air, the call-in number is 347-327-9997. Here she is, your host, Roxy Lopez.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Truth Denied Talk Radio. Today is October 7th. It's high noon in the desert. This is a live show, as it is every Friday at noon. I'll be your host today, Roxy Lopez, and I really look forward to our guest, Paul Dale Roberts. Some of you have been writing in. You're very interested about some of the stories that he has to share with you. He is a paranormal investigator. And I'm going to let Paul describe his background for you as soon as we get him on. And he's going to catch us up on Area 51. If you remember, we did a show with Commander Sergeant James Norton and John Vasquez regarding the Fort Benning incident. And Paul Dale Roberts was on that show towards the end. And they've been doing some investigating over at Area 51. So he's going to catch us back up with that, give us some more information about that. A lot of you have been writing in about the chupacabras, and that is an interest I have as well. He's going to catch us up with that, of an investigation in, I believe, the San Miguel Islands. And then, of course, Skinwalker Ranch, which is very interesting, and a case of the sprites, that is definitely something I really want to hear about the sprites. I've never even heard of sprites until I met Paul. Anyway, without any further ado, let me introduce all of you to Paul Dale Roberts. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hi, Roxy. I love being on your show. So, yeah, I got a lot to talk about, and I'm out in this beautiful blue sky, but my sinuses are killing me, but I'm going to deal with it.
Oh, my. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, thank you for taking the time to be on the show. It's our pleasure to have you. And, Paul, can you just give us a little bit about, your background for the listening audience so they can, we didn't get to do that the last time that you were on the show because there were so many people on the show at that point. So why don't we talk a little bit about what you've done? You've got an absolutely incredible background. So I'd like to hear more about that.
Well, Roxy, when I was growing up on Effie Street in Fresno, I thought I lived in a haunted house because so many weird things were happening to me. I was actually thrown into a heater and it burned my leg and everything else. So all these experiences were happening to me, and I was just really freaked out about it. So at a very young age, I started reading about the paranormal. And I became very well versed in paranormal. In fact, I started reading Brad Steiger books, and now some of my articles are in Brad Steiger books. At some point in time, 1979, I got into military intelligence. And one of the things that, the reason why I became a 97 Bravo intelligence analyst is I said to myself, if anyone knows about UFOs, it would be military intelligence. So I got into military intelligence, and when I was with the Photo Interpretation Center in Korea, 6 photographs came in. And on those 6 photographs, they were part of a bigger picture of satellite reconnaissance videos of UFOs. And
Paul, what year was this?
That was in, at that time, I went back into the service in 1979.
Okay.
I was in the service from 73 to 76, took a 3-year break, and in 1979 went back into the service as a 97 Bravo. And I would say in 1981, I was with the Photo Interpretation Center in Korea, and that's when I saw the 6 photographs. And on the 6 photographs, on the back of them, it was written intelligent movement. So that told me at that point in time that the military knew something about UFOs or were looking into UFOs. And Even though Project Blue Book closed shop around in 1969 or 1968 or something like that, and they were trying to explain UFOs as weather inversions, swamp gas, balloons, or whatever, the military, especially military intelligence, was looking into UFOs, because here I am at PICK, Photo Interpretation Center in Korea, and I see the 6 photographs, and on the back of the photographs it says intelligent movement. So I knew at that point in time that we were not alone.
What did those pictures look like, by the way? Can you describe those 6 photos at all?
Yeah, like I believe like one was cigar shape, one looked like ball lightning, 3 of them disc shaped, and the 6th one was globe shaped.
Okay. Thank you.
And then after military intelligence, I at some point in time I was dating a girl who was a ghost hunter. And she goes, "Wow, Paul, you're very well versed in the paranormal." She goes, "You ought to go on one of my ghost hunts." And also, too, I was a freelance journalist and write an article. And I said, "Yeah, okay, sounds good." So I went on this ghost hunt at the National Hotel. And I said, "Well, who's the owner of this ghost hunting group?" And she goes, "That's Shannon McCabe." So I went over to Shannon McCabe, and I introduced myself. I said, "I'm a freelance journalist, blah, blah, blah." She looks me up on the Internet, and she sees all these things that I've written, and she goes, "Oh, I love the press." So she took me over around National Hotel, showed me how to use the ghost hunting equipment, and I wrote the first article and was published in 2 British magazines and 14 ghost websites. And then I get an email from her, and she CCs her whole team, and she says, "Paul Roberts is now going to be one of our paranormal investigators. I'm going to train him, and he's going to be our ghost writer." And I wrote Shannon back, and at that time I was in the comic book business. And I said, "Shannon, I love the paranormal. I just don't have time because I'm really, really involved with the comic book business." And she goes, "Paul, paranormal is really hot right now." She goes, "You ought to try it out for a couple months." And I said, "Okay, I'll check it out for a while." So I contacted my vice president of my comic book company, and I said, "Can you run shop for a couple months while I do this paranormal thing?" And he's been running shop ever since, and it's been something like 6 years now. And I've been on 600 investigations.
Wow. Wow, that's absolutely amazing. And now, as far as that's a lot of work.
A lot of work, and
wow.
and you have to have a really, really strong passion in what you do, because a lot of the investigations, and Roxy, I'm not going to BS you on this, but a lot of investigations we find nothing, and sometimes it's absolutely boring, and especially, where there's just no activity and we debunk a lot of stuff, and and I'll still write an article about it because people need to know the ones that we debunk or the places that there is no activity. So, and you're not alone with that statement. I've heard this time and time again with paranormal investigators and UFO investigators. I mean, even UFO hunters. They've talked about this as well. That most cases investigated are, you come back with nothing. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means that you just didn't get the readings or so forth. So, you're making a statement that's pretty. I think people are used to hearing that. Right.
But all we care about is the ones that you did find something.
And see, the only thing is, though, Roxy, I placed the article out, and let's say I don't find anything. Okay, let's say I go to this house and I did an investigation. I bring the team over there. We find nothing, and I'll still write an article explaining that how I found nothing. But I'll spice up the article because I hear so many ghost stories. People call me from all over the world telling me their little ghost stories or their UFO stories or whatever, and I'll splice their little stories into my articles which makes the article an interesting read. And I've had some comments from some of my readers where they'll say, wow, Paul, that was a great article. You really kept me focused on that one UFO story and that one ghost story. But then I found the conclusion after your investigation that you found nothing. so
right.
I keep their attention by telling other stories.
Right, of course. So speaking of stories, where we left off on the last show, when you came on, when we did the show with Fort Benning, we left off with a very intriguing Area 51 investigation that we were doing. Can you catch us up on where we're at, where you are at, where you and your team are at with that investigation? Why did you go there? What were you looking for? And where are you at right now?
Well, to be honest with you, going to Area 51, I didn't expect to find a retrieved crashed UFO or anything like that. I didn't expect to actually get on the base. But what I wanted to do was to go over there and interview some of the witnesses that have seen strange activity at Area 51. So that's one of the things that I did. Now, another thing that I did is I wanted to get soil samples. We did that. And also, too, I wanted to see the security that they had at Area 51. So as we were approaching the back gate, the team members that I had was Judy Radushak, Regina Telez, Tammy Strayling, and Chantel Apakadaka. And she's one of our psychics. And I utilize psychics on UFO investigations, and I'll explain that in just a few minutes, why I do that. But as we approached that gate, Judy and Chantel saw a lighted object over on the hillside. I didn't see it, but they did. And then all of a sudden, a Jeep appears, and you can see the dust cloud as it was parallel driving with us towards the back gate. So they were actually really watching us and keeping pace with us as we were approaching the back gate. As we approach the back gate, you see all the signs that you can get shot on sight, blah, blah, blah. This is a restricted area, no video cameras, no taking pictures, blah, blah, blah. So we see all these signs, and we see all these video cameras along the gate. I mean, they're really filming us. And also, too, they have all these sound-enhancing equipment, so they can hear your footsteps, they can hear you talking. So whatever our conversation was, they can hear us. And as I was looking through my binoculars, I spot a man in camouflage fatigues sitting on the hillside. And he's looking at me with his binoculars. And strapped on his back appeared to be a sniper rifle. So they take that very, very seriously. So their security there is just incredible. And I was not going to go and jump the fence or anything like that and get shot just to see if they're going to shoot me or not. So that was incredible in itself. Then we took soil samples, and the soil samples were sent to a UFO group called the Winter Group. And Robert Winter, who happens to be the nephew of Edgar Winter, if you remember back in the day, Edgar Winter was some kind of rock star, and he came out with a song called Frankenstein.
Yes, Edgar Winter was huge in the 70s, and so he and his brother together were huge. And
right.
Yes, I know Edgar Winter. As a matter of fact, I know him personally. So yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So Edgar Winter's, what are you saying, brother, son, what?
It's Edgar Winter's nephew, Robert Winter, has a UFO group called the Winter Group.
Okay.
And they're supposed to have access to two laboratories, one in New Mexico and one at Los Alamitos. So I sent the soil samples that we gathered to Robert Winter. Robert Winter emailed me and said something about eradication. which is the use of radioactive material on vegetation. So like if you're doing farming or something, you're growing tomatoes, and you eradicate the soil. The only thing is there's no farmland out in that area, so there's no reason for that. And I never received the results of the soil samples from Robert Winter. I inquired about it, and I said, Robert, where's the results? Because he said he had this fantastic report for me and everything else, and he never produced the results, and he never contacted me back again. He just vanished. So I don't know what the situation is on that.
How recently was this that you took? First of all, when did you take the samples, and when did you last have contact with the Winter Group?
The last time I had contact with the Winter Group was probably because I FedExed the soil samples over to them. Probably the last time I talked to Robert was by email, and that was probably about a month and a half ago. And he said that the report was headed my way, and the report never came. And I emailed him back, and I said, I never received the report, Robert, what's going on? And no response. And I asked him again by email, no response. So, and then I tried to call him, and there's no communication. He won't pick up the phone, so I don't know what's going on.
Interesting. So you're going to continue to follow up with that and see if you can't get a hold of him. Obviously, he's probably got a pretty busy group. I can testify to the fact that I actually went out to Area 51 in 1990, February of 1990. And no, there is absolutely no farmland out there whatsoever, and it's miles and miles and miles of desert. And I'm familiar with the ridge that you're talking about, and it is a highly secured and patrolled military base. And, that's pretty much out in the open now. In 1990, I mean, it was still a figment of most people's imagination, like it wasn't real. Area 51 wasn't really on the books. I don't think that the general public really came to believe that Area 51 and Groom Lake was a true facility until, in my recollection, is when Popular Mechanics finally came out with Area 51 story and the Aurora Project, and I think that's when all hell broke loose on that. So, but thanks for that report there, and I hope that the Winter Group now, do you still have more soil samples in your custody to check out with other people? Maybe have somebody else analyze it?
No, unfortunately, because I really, really believed Robert was going to take care of this. And I sent them everything.
Okay, so it sounds like you probably need to revisit Area 51 and get yourself some more samples, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, yeah.
I mean, that's where you're left. I'm sorry to hear about that, but, this happens, Shite happens. So moving on. Moving on. What do you think that, in your opinion, while we're still on the subject matter of Area 51 and UFO cases, what do you think was your most intriguing and best story in your UFO cases that is most convincing to you or most alarming to you in your UFO investigations?
Well, actually, it wasn't an investigation, but was very intriguing to me because before I got into military intelligence, in 1974, I was stationed at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I was with two soldiers, and we were walking into the town of Columbia, and we saw in the sky 6 UFOs. They were blue discs, and they were glowing, and as we're looking at in the sky at these UFOs in formation, one of the soldiers goes, geese? I go, how can it be geese when they're glowing blue and they're disc-shaped? And then we all looked at each other. What the hell? Those are UFOs. And I go, it has to be. And we're watching them. They're moving slowly across the sky, and then they erratically dispersed into different directions and just, in the blink of an eye, just vanished. And we were totally astonished by this. Well, come to find out, and I mentioned that in the Fort Benning story, that on the East Coast, military installations were getting a lot of UFO activity, which falls into play with the story of Fort Benning in 1977, because there were so many UFO sightings out in that area. And my situation where I saw my UFOs was in 1974. And then what I saw was not conventional aircraft. There's just no way. I mean, there's just no way we can have aircraft that just can go into zigzag-type movement, and then all of a sudden, bam, in the blink of an eye, just vanish. I just can't conceive the idea that we have any kind of aircraft that can do something like that. So
now you're citing you're citing with your friends that said, "Oh, those are geese." That sighting, was that a daytime sighting or a nighttime sighting?
It was a nighttime sighting.
Okay, yeah, so that would be pretty interesting. I watch the skies day and night, and here in the Arizona desert, it's real common, if you will, to see, hawks at night, and, when there's a full moon and stuff. And I'll tell you this much, they don't glow blue. It's real obvious that they're hawks, and they're very dark, and they're sort of shadowy looking, and they don't glow whatsoever. So if that was a nighttime sighting, yeah, I would disagree as well that this was geese, flying around. How many craft did you see in that particular sighting?
There was 6, and they were in V formation.
V formation, and that was 1974.
That was 1974. And what was really unusual, because in 1976, I was out of the Army. I just came out of the Army, and I was living in Sacramento, and I was living with the girlfriend that I had at the time named Helen Lang. And this is an amazing story in itself. But we were living in this apartment, and she comes screaming into the apartment, and she goes, Paul, I just saw a UFO. And she was just hysterical. She was crying and everything else. And she was saying that the UFO was hovering 200 feet above her head. Well, I didn't see it. And I had a hard time really believing her, because I had already told her about my 1974 UFO experience. And she was very skeptical about my story, and she didn't believe in UFOs. And now all of a sudden she's claiming that she saw a UFO. And I just thought it was really weird. And I just looked at her and I said, look, if you really saw a UFO, let's go to the Sacramento Sheriff's Department and make a report. She goes, okay, let's do it. So we went to the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and they gave us an 800 number. And that 800 toll-free number was to Alan Hynek. Dr. Alan Hynek, and he had the Center of UFO Studies in Chicago, Illinois. And I was not familiar with Dr. Hynek at the time. And she made her report. And later on, we broke up, and Dr. Hynek called me and said, I need to talk to Helen. And I said, well, Helen and I broke up, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I do have a drawing that she did of the UFO, and he had me mail it to him. Well, come to find out, the Sacramento Bee, they published her story. And on the night that she saw the UFO, 2 other people from different areas of Sacramento, and all these people did not know each other, saw the same UFO. So I knew at that point in time Helen Lane was telling me the truth, and I was just totally amazed. It's like she really did see a UFO. And that happened in 1976, and I was very disappointed that I did not see the UFO.
Right, absolutely. And, like bringing that up to speed, the current, a lot of the reports that we are getting, I'm not a UFO investigator, but we do have a UFO group, and I've always been fascinated with UFOs for many, since I was a little kid. So I can't help it but be fascinated by UFOs. We get a lot of sightings out here in the Arizona desert, and one of the latest, pretty much the last 6-8 months are these big balls, big glowing orange balls. We're getting a lot of reports about these big glowing orange balls that are definitely not meteors or meteorites, because they're coming down and then they go back up again, or they make a left-hand turn, like you said, or a right-hand turn. And the other thing that we're seeing is we're seeing formations of, what look to be appear to be like stars. They're so high up there, and they're formations that split up into the sky, then come back together. And we know obviously that's not a star. And we know from tracking with James Gilliland at his ranch that he showed us the difference between satellites and UFOs. So this is all very current, going on right now as well. So it's all very intriguing, and we're just like I said, I just keep an eye on it now. And thanks for that, sharing that story. Now, what is Skinwalker Ranch, and what did you do with Skinwalker Ranch, and where is this Skinwalker Ranch?
Okay, Skinwalker Ranch. Before we get into that, what you're talking about sounds like star-like UFOs, which on MUFON they actually do reports on star-like UFOs, and we actually witnessed star-like UFOs on our Lawrence Livermore Lab UFO investigation, and then you're talking about the globe-shaped, like orange UFOs. Were you mentioning? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Those type of UFOs are seen a lot in Russia.
Is that right?
Yeah. So that's kind of amazing that you mentioned that. So I just had to get that out there.
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Well, and
Russia.
You're familiar with Peter Davenport, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so Peter Davenport and I go back to about 1988, when Peter first started getting together the UFO reporting. And, of course, we all know it's blown up. I mean, he used to be on Coast to Coast with Art Bell all the time. And, of course, he's still a guest on Coast to Coast. But Peter's really come a long way with his reporting, worldwide UFO reportings. And he also has major reports involving these big orange globes. I mean, this is it's interesting that you're bringing up Russia, because we're having a lot of those sightings in Arizona. A lot of those sightings are coming through in Arizona and across the U.S., so I definitely want to keep up on that as well. And like I said, his reporting is also showing that, proving that there's just thousands of these reports coming in the last year. So interesting new developments with UFOs.
Well, they had those the 6 hikers that were climbing on this one Russian mountain. I don't know the name of the mountain or anything like that. But they saw, when they got up there, their bodies were just totally mutilated. There was like radiation burns. And people have cited those orange globe UFOs in those mountains on the night that they were killed. And they had ran out of their tent, and their footsteps, they followed their footsteps, and then they found them in the ravine, and all 6 of them were just totally mutilated and burned beyond recognition. So there's no explanation for that. And that happened, I believe, like in maybe if I remember right, I think like in the 1940s or something like that.
That's really interesting that you just described what you did, because I don't know if you've seen the movie Apollo 18, but you just described, without giving this away to anybody who hasn't seen the movie, you've just described the Apollo 18 movie that just recently came out. You just described it.
Are you serious? Really?
Yes.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yes. You need to go and see it because it correlates with the story that you just told. That's very interesting, including the Russian story. I'm not going to say anything more because I don't want to blow it. I don't want to ruin it for those who haven't seen it. But you and I will catch up on that. You need to see Apollo 18, and then you tell me because you have just described. You just gave me goosebumps when you said this because that is the Apollo 18 movie, currently out. Anyway, and so now, what about the Skinwalker Ranch? I'm interested. I want to know what is Skinwalker Ranch? Where is it? And what's going on there?
Well, when the Gormans moved into the ranch, the Gorman Ranch, which is known as Skinwalker Ranch, all kinds of crazy things were happening there. They were having poltergeist activity. They saw shadow people. They encountered a bulletproof dog. Okay, and let me explain to you about this bulletproof dog or a bulletproof wolf. What the son described it as a big dog, and the father described it as a big wolf. But they saw this wolf-like creature actually gnawing on the cap on one of their caps, and they came out there with their shotguns and they shot at it, and the bullets were just bouncing off this dog, wolf, or whatever. And it just walked away and sort of like vanished. So with this kind of unusual activity, also too, they saw an RV that was actually like going up the hillside, and as they were watching the RV, it morphed into a UFO and flew off into the sky. So with all this type of activity, and also to the Indian legends that it was like a place for the gods to descend from, that they came from some type of portal in that area. That's when the NIS, the National Institute of Science, started investigating Skinwalker Ranch, and they actually purchased the ranch. And it's a government-sponsored agency that was doing the investigation. A lot of people think that NIS is actually the Office of Scientific Investigation and Research, OSIR, and that they changed their name to NIS. And one of the scientists claims that during the investigation that they had over there, they actually saw a portal open up in the sky, and from the portal, a Bigfoot creature came out and ran off into the woods. So with all of the stories about Skinwalker Ranch, I had to investigate, and that's over in Utah. It's, I would say, about maybe 21 miles outside of Salt Lake City. And the night that we went there was a major, major storm. And I had brought with me Chantal Apothecary and her aunt, and they were two of my investigators. And Chantal is the psychic. And as we got over there, we finally located it. I mean, it was just a treacherous drive through the storm and everything else. We're setting up our tents, and we're falling in the mud and everything else. It was just a total nightmare. And I did witness what I would think is ball lightning. I've never seen anything like that in my life. But it was like lightning was just all over the place. And here comes this, like, from the sky, like this ball lightning that hits the ground and just kind of like blows up like a small hand grenade and vanished. And I said, wow, I think that was ball lightning. So that was one thing I did witness. We did hear some strange sounds. We tried to record it, but it was just so much rain that the sound was muffled. You couldn't really make it out. The very next morning, Chantal's aunt had pneumonia, and we had to go back. So we were supposed to spend about 7 days at Skinwalker Ranch, and we wind up spending one night at Skinwalker Ranch. So it was very unfortunate, but it's like I was looking at her. She was deathly ill. I said, okay, we need to go back home, and that's what we did.
Well, obviously, you'll have another opportunity, and I hear this type of story as well a lot, especially with ghost hunters investigating buildings where they plan on staying for X amount of time, but then something comes up or their equipment's not working, and then they've got to, move on to their next investigation, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. So that's another, it's maddening for me as somebody who is just not a part of that investigation, and I'm watching and I want to know more, and it's like, God, if that was me, I'd be going back like in 2 days, and people don't understand that you've got like commitments and a long list as other investigators do. They just keep moving on, and that's probably one of the reasons why you just have to slate it for another day. Now, what about this chupacabra in San Miguel Island?
Oh, okay. I was contacted by a person who wanted to remain anonymous, and he made claim that he took his catamaran around the island and saw the original type of chupacabra. There's 2 types of chupacabras. There's one that you hear about in Texas. It could be a dog with mange, or it could be a coyote with mange. Well, that's not the original chupacabra. The original chupacabra originates from Puerto Rico, and the chupacabra that originates from Puerto Rico is usually described as reptilian-looking, has big glowing red eyes. It has small little bat wings that when it attacks its prey, it leaves 3 puncture holes in the chest area and drains all the blood. Like 30 chickens were found with 3 puncture holes in their chest areas, and all 30 chickens were drained of their blood. That's the original chupacabra, and it can leap large distances. And the gentleman who told me that he saw chupacabra in San Miguel Island, he said he saw the original chupacabra. And I said, wow, that really caught my interest. And he says, well, Paul, look, bring another investigator, bring one investigator with you. And so I brought, at the time, Christina George with me because she can speak Spanish. And we did interviews along San Diego where we talked to various people, to see if they believe in chupacabra and everything else. So we did a lot of interviews out there. And a lot of the Hispanic people do believe in chupacabra. And they flew us out of Los Angeles, and we, if I remember right, I think it was Santa Cruz Island, but we stopped over at Santa Cruz Island to pick up a biologist, and then flew over to San Miguel Island to do the actual investigation. We had a flare, which is forward-looking infrared, and we picked up scat, we picked up hair samples that we found on the island and everything else. And on our flare, we picked up an image which got us pretty excited. But later on, as biologists analyzed what we recorded, he came to the conclusion it was an island fox. So we actually never found chupacabra over there, but the guy was willing to, put us up in a hotel and everything else and do an investigation over there because he actually believes that he did see chupacabra there. So, I don't know. And I think that chupacabra, though, is just like maybe Bigfoot, an interdimensional type being. So they come into our reality. Let's say like Bigfoot, it'll build a nest, it'll eat some of the berries and do whatever it's got to do and leave its footprints on the ground. And then we wonder, how come we never captured Bigfoot? Well, perhaps Bigfoot goes into our dimension and back into his own dimension. And what is really odd about Bigfoot or chupacabra is like when people have these sightings, sometimes there's a lot of UFO activity. When they have a sighting of Chupacabra, if they have a sighting of Bigfoot, they also too see UFO activity after their sighting. So it seems like it's connected.
Right, and I think that the listeners who follow this type of information know that as well. I mean, there are a lot of now Bigfoot investigations going on, and I've always been interested in the Chupacabra. I've always found it a fascinating, sort of dark, the Chupacabra, because of the animal mutilations that come alongside of it. And it's interesting that you're saying that the correlation between, UFO sightings and then these visitations by a Chupacabra sort of happen at the same time. I think it's interesting, and I also think that it's fascinating that investigators are really beginning to think that this is an interdimensional being as well, just like you had mentioned, the Bigfoot, because they come and go, and where's the proof? It just fascinates me, absolutely fascinates me. Now, I do also have quite a few fans of the Mothman, and that's another fascinating. What is the Mothman, and what are your relationships to any investigations or stories surrounding Mothman?
Well, Mothman became infamous, let's say, in Point Pleasant, Virginia, and that was back in the 1960s, the latter part of the 60s, and there was an abandoned TNT factory. And supposedly they think that this abandoned TNT factory opened up a portal in which Mothman came through. And Mothman was seen, it would actually pace cars on the road, would actually keep up with the cars. They would see this huge creature with a long wings, a long wingspan, no neck, and huge red eyes. Almost looked like a huge owl. A lot of people, especially the skeptics, think that it is a large owl. Also, too, a lot of people believe that when you see Mothman, it's a harbinger of doom, that it's a prelude to a disaster. And the Silver Bridge collapsed, and something like 43 people died. And after the bridge collapsed, Mothman wasn't seen anymore. So we had a sighting of Bat Squatch in Mount Shasta, in which I interviewed 3 witnesses. And then we had a sighting of Mothman on the Sacramento Bridge, and I interviewed 3 witnesses to that. Only one witness in Sacramento who saw Mothman, and only one witness who saw Bat Squatch, which is similar to Mothman in Mount Shasta, came forth when Monster Quest contacted me from the History Channel and said, we would like to talk to your witnesses. So I tried to get all 6 witnesses, and 4 of them bowed out, and 2 said, yeah, we'll go on camera, we'll say what we saw. So the witness I had in Sacramento said that he saw Mothman on top of the Sacramento Bridge, and it was kind of hunched down, and then it flew off the bridge in a big swoop towards the river and up into the sky and disappeared. The Bat Squatch situation in Mount Shasta, it was in the trees, and it swooped down towards 3 witnesses and then flew off into the air and vanished. So if it was a prelude towards a disaster here in Sacramento, the only disaster we have here in Sacramento is the budget. So
right.
Nothing bad happened over here. There's been no more Mothman sightings. But Mothman, I mean, there's people who claim that they saw Mothman before 9/11.
Isn't that something? I've heard that as well. And, Paul, I was going to say, actually, the listeners have some questions some very good questions. So I definitely want to get to those questions because we're already down to the last 14 minutes of the show, if you can believe that. So I think we should jump into those questions. And we have a question for you, Paul. He says, I'd like to know what Paul thinks on UFO technology being used by governments, and if he thinks it's possible that governments are using their military budgets to carry out secret space programs that are far more advanced than we realize. And that's from one of the listeners. His name is Greg. That's an interesting question. What do you think about that, Paul?
Well, how's it going there, Greg? One of the a military official, and his name is escaping me right now. It's right on the tip of my tongue. I just can't think of it. But anyway, he said that that our military actually, with these retrieved crashed UFOs, especially the ones in Roswell, that's when it all started, that the technology like fiber optics, lasers, bulletproof vests, and everything else came from the information, the back engineering that we did on crashed UFOs. But there's so many skeptics out there that are saying, hey, you know, we actually came up with this technology on our own. All I know for a fact is that our military is investigating UFOs because I saw that. I experienced that when I was in 97 Bravo. So I know that they are looking into it. They're investigating it. Perhaps they actually know what these UFOs are. I actually believe that at some point in time, there's this elite group out there that has knowledge. They're within the government, and it's a black government. It's a dark government. It's a shadow government. That's what it is. A shadow government that has knowledge of what these UFOs are, and they're doing black ops, or where there's operations done in total secrecy on UFOs. And at some point in time, I do believe our military was contacted by UFOs. There's just too much information. And then not only that, CNN News, we had a situation where a lot of military personnel came up and said, hey, yeah, we have been contacted by UFOs. We do know what UFOs are. The military is looking into UFOs. But then the whole story was just poo-pooed, and you heard nothing more about it. So there's a lot of things going on. And
well, I wanted to add to what you were saying, Paul, for Greg. Area 51, for example, is just one example of black project funding. And as far as space programs going and military budgets, I think that it's all very compartmentalized. And to answer Greg's question, I do believe absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt, no pun intended, that shadow governments exist and shadow space programs exist and aerospace programs. And yes, they're using a black project funding to fund all of these, billions and billions of dollars of like Paul mentioned, back engineering or reverse engineering. Absolutely. And we're far more, yes, I completely agree with Paul. We are so far ahead of what we have publicly exposed with our technology. It's far-reaching, probably fairly incomprehensible. So I just thought I'd add that to answer Greg as well.
So there's a lot going on that we just, and the reason why they don't put the information out, I'm going to tell you why they probably don't put the information out. Because with Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, when he did that radio broadcast, our government saw how our society panicked. There's people shooting their rifles up in the air, people freaking out, people getting hurt when they thought that we were being invaded by Mars in New Jersey. And that was through a radio broadcast done by Orson Welles. And that was right there. The government probably looked at it and said, hey, we're not ready to know that we're not alone. We're going to suppress this information from the people, from the public. We're just not ready for it.
Right, and you know, my mother was alive when those shows were on the air, and I remember when I was a teenager, you know, I didn't. She explained it, you know, the Orson Welles and what happened and this and that. And you're absolutely correct. It caused mayhem, massive mayhem, and we all understand that. You know, if, back then doing an experiment of an invasion from Mars. I mean, if you today, if you told the planet, you know, if you had some mass planetary attack, yeah, they would totally freak out. Which is, you know, that's another thing. You know, Project Bluebeam. You know, we all went. Were you just thinking of that too? Yeah.
Well, no, but Roxy, and the answer also to Greg's question, at some point in time in my military career, I was working with OPFOR opposing forces, and I was teaching the Soviet threat to elite troops like the 101st Airborne, 82nd Airborne, Air Force Special Operations, Green Beret, Delta Force, you name it. And I was teaching them the Soviet threat. And one of the elite groups out of Delta Force, and we're just kind of like, just talking a little bit about black op programs. And he looked at me, he goes, Sergeant Roberts, he says, if you knew some of the black operations that we do have, he says, you would pass out, you would faint. I said, can you tell me just one? He goes, of course not. He goes, I can't tell you. And his top secret, like I had a top secret SBI, which is Special Background Investigation, takes about 6 months to a year to get. My classification, my top secret classification is very low on the totem pole. His was very high up. And he was telling me, you know, the black ops that we have, that I would actually faint if I actually knew what one of their programs was. So I do believe that they really have some incredible stuff going on.
Yeah, wow. And you never, you know, you get close, but you don't get all the way into it. And you're right; it would probably, you know, be absolutely mind blowing. You know, look at what's happening even today with the whole quantum world that we're living in. We can't even keep up. So I agree. There's stuff that even though we want to know and we want to see at the same time, are we even? I mean, seriously, is our head even ready to wrap our mind around? I mean, if they suddenly said to us, "Okay, look." We've been dealing with 17 alien races. You're right. I think I would just fall over, even though we've heard this over and over and over and over, and we've seen it with our own eyes, certain sightings, etc. We really would. We'd be like in shock, like, you mean it's real? You know, there's a difference between thinking it's real and knowing it's real. So you're absolutely right. Paul, we're winding down the show, and I know my listeners are going to want to get in touch with you. We're going to put out a YouTube video of this show and have all of your information attached to that video so that this will be ongoing in the archives for people to visit and on our website, etc. But let's just, for the listening audience, can we give them somewhere that they can get in touch with you, your website, etc.?
Okay. Yes, HPI, Haunted Paranormal Investigations International, and that's www.hpiparanormal.net. And also, too, they can just simply Google my name, Paul Dale Roberts, and they'll find tons and tons of my paranormal articles. And I'm on Facebook.
Yes, okay, and I will share your Facebook link. And Paul's very easy to find on Facebook because, Paul, I think you're the only Paul Dale Roberts.
Yeah, that's why I throw in the middle name, because there's a ton of Paul Roberts, but there's only one Paul Dale Roberts.
Now, do you, through the HPIParanormal.net, do you have a contact there as well, so if people want to contact you via email, that all that information is available there?
Yes. Well, also, too, when they find my articles on the Internet, all my contact information is there because I use my cell phone as a paranormal hotline. They'll find my telephone number, and they'll find my email address.
Okay. And so if they have reports as well, they can contact you as well through those phone numbers that you have listed, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, so there you go. So if you want to get in touch with Paul Dale Roberts, just go to www.hpiparanormal.net. If you've got stories that you want to share with him, I'm sure Paul, he is an investigator on quite a few different levels. So he's interested in hearing your stories and your contact information. Please, be sure to leave that with Paul so he can get back with you. Paul, it's been absolutely enjoyable. We're winding down. I think we've got about 5 minutes left. Can you wrap up in about 2 minutes? What is a sprite, and what is the case of the sprites?
Okay. Sprites, usually are seen in Europe, and very few cases are in the United States. And we had a sprite case in Cloverdale, and the lady said that these sprites, they look like little bright orbs that fly through the room, actually would go into her mouth and choke her. And would cause her, give her a hard time breathing. Well, some of the sprites that are seen in the United States, if you see sprites, supposedly there's a demon nearby.
Oh, my gosh.
No, yeah. And with sprites, also, too, sprites are brought into our reality through black magic or dark Wiccan practices. And come to find out, as I was doing my interview with her, her son's friend, his best friend, would come over to the house, and they would practice black magic. And she didn't even bring up the black magic part till I just kind of briefed her on some of the cases in the United States and how sprites were brought forth. And she goes, "Oh my gosh," she goes, "my son's friend practices black magic." So we did the investigation there. We got some anomalies in our photographs. We got some EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon, and I did a blessing of the house, and she says that the house is now clean. She's able to sleep in the house, and she was sleeping in her truck because she was too afraid to sleep in her own home.
I would be too. Now, is that case on your hpiparanormal.net so that people can go ahead and take a look at it in the photos and so forth?
Oh, sure. Or either they can just go ahead and Google Sprites, Cloverdale, Paul Dale Roberts, and they'll find the article.
Oh, okay, great. All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to say to the listening audience? Because we have just burned right through that hour with you, Paul.
Okay. All I can say is to seek the truth, because that's what I do. I look for the truth, and I put it out there the best way I can, So I enjoyed doing the show, Roxy. I love you're a great host and everything else. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, wonderful having you on, Paul. You're such a sweet man. The first time I ever met Paul, on the phone, I was like, wow, he's such a sweet man with his big, gnarly background. And I thank you. We all thank you for your work. Keep up the good work, Paul. We'll certainly speak soon. And we're going to let you go now. So that was Paul Dale Roberts. Again, if you want to get in touch with him, it's www.hpiparanormal.net. Of course, you can also find information at Google Paul Dale Roberts for all of the conversations that we had today. We'll put up a YouTube video about this. And Monday, the Just Bernard Show, counterculture icon, fractal artist, author, and creator of the Veggie Burger, Gregory Sams, joins Bernard and Yvonne for a discussion of his new book, Son of God. That sounds great. This is the Truth Denied Talk Radio. I'm your host, Roxy Lopez, and have a wonderful weekend.
UFOs, it would be military intelligence. So I got into military intelligence, and when I was with the Photo Interpretation Center in Korea, 6 photographs came in. And on those 6 photographs, they were part of a bigger picture of satellite reconnaissance videos of UFOs. And
Paul, what year was this?
That was in at that time. I went back into the service in 1979.
Okay.
I was in the service from 73 to 76, took a 3-year break, and in 1979 went back into the service as a 97 Bravo. And I would say in 1981 I was with the Photo Interpretation Center in Korea, and that's when I saw the 6 photographs. And on the 6 photographs, on the back of them, it was written intelligent movement. So that told me at that point in time that the military knew something about UFOs or were looking into UFOs. And even though Project Blue Book closed shop around in 1969 or 1968 or something like that, and they were trying to explain UFOs as weather inversions, swamp gas, balloons, or whatever, the military, especially military intelligence, was
GIC Radio presents The Truth Denied, Talk Radio, with your host, Roxy Lopez, where truth never lies. If you would like to speak with Roxy on the air, the call-in number is 347-327-9997. Here she is, your host, Roxy Lopez.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Truth Denied Talk Radio. Today is October 7th. It's high noon in the desert. This is a live show, as it is every Friday at noon. I'll be your host today, Roxy Lopez, and I really look forward to our guest, Paul Dale Roberts. Some of you have been writing in. You're very interested about some of the stories that he has to share with you. He is a paranormal investigator, and I'm going to let Paul describe his. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, thank you for taking the time to be on the show. It's our pleasure to have you. And Paul, can you just give us a little bit about, your background for the listening audience so they can, we didn't get to do that the last time that you were on the show because there were so many people on the show at that point. So why don't we talk a little bit about what you've done? You've got an absolutely incredible background. So I'd like to hear more about that.
Well, Roxy, when I was growing up on Effie Street in Fresno, I thought I lived in a haunted house because so many weird things were happening to me. I was actually thrown into a heater and it burned my leg and everything else. So all these experiences were happening to me, and I was just really freaked out about it. So at a very young age, I started reading about the paranormal. And I became very well versed in paranormal. In fact, I started reading Brad Steiger books, and now some of my articles are in Brad Steiger books. At some point in time, 1979, I got into military intelligence. And one of the things that, the reason why I became a 97 Bravo intelligence analyst is I said to myself, if anyone knows about
background for you as soon as we get him on, and he's going to catch us up on Area 51. If you remember, we did a show with Commander Sergeant James Norton and John Vasquez regarding the Fort Benning incident, and Paul Dale Roberts was on that show towards the end, and they've been doing some investigating over at Area 51, so he's going to catch us back up with that, give us some more information about that. A lot of you have been writing in about the chupacabras, and that is an interest I have as well. He's going to catch us up with that, of an investigation in, I believe, the San Miguel Islands. And then, of course, Skinwalker Ranch, which is very interesting, and a case of the sprites, that is definitely something I'm going to I really want to hear about the sprites. I'd never even heard of sprites until I met Paul. Anyway, without any further ado, let me introduce all of you to Paul Dale Roberts. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Hi, Roxy. I love being on your show. So, yeah, I got a lot to talk about, and I'm out in this beautiful blue sky, but my sinuses are killing me, but I'm going to deal with it.
Oh, my.
Looking into UFOs, because here I am at PICK, Photo Interpretation Center in Korea, and I see the 6 photographs, and on the back of the photographs it says intelligent movement. So I knew at that point in time that we were not alone.
What did those pictures look like, by the way? Can you describe those 6 photos at all?
Yeah, like I believe like one was cigar shape, one looked like ball lightning, 3 of them disc shaped, and the 6th one was globe shaped.
Okay. Thank you.
And then after military intelligence, I at some point in time I was dating a girl who was a ghost hunter, and she goes, "Wow, Paul, you're very well versed in the paranormal." She goes, "You ought to go on one of my ghost hunts, and also too, I was a freelance journalist, and write an article." And I said, "Yeah, okay, sounds good." So I went on this ghost hunt at the National Hotel, and I said, "Well, who's the owner of this ghost hunting group?" And she goes, "That's Shannon McCabe." So I went over to Shannon McCabe, and I introduced myself. I said, "I'm a freelance journalist, blah, blah, blah." She looks me up on the Internet, and she sees all these things that I've